Have you ever gotten into trouble for something you didn't do? Imagine you got arrested for that and couldn't afford a lawyer. You were convicted of a crime you did not commit and sentenced to 19 years in prison. That is, 19 years without your family, friends, career, dreams. This is what happened to Huwe Burton, an innocent man exonerated through the work of the Innocence Project. After spending 19 years in prison for the wrongful murder conviction of his mother. Join us as we support Innocence Project to end unjust imprisonment. Donate $19 for 19 years of unjust imprisonment. Donate now.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us for an evening with Huwe Burton and Nigel Quiroz supporting the Innocence Project. Like many of you, 2020 has highlighted the disparity and unjust issues facing many within our communities. Due to George Floyd, Breonna Taylor's, and so many others' deaths, many business owners and leaders throughout the nation came together this year to discuss our concerns about systemic racism and social injustices against Black people. After 2 months of dialogue, we determined a plan of action. And in September 2020, Business Leaders for Racial and Social Justice was formed. My name is Lindsay All.
And I'm Dr. Dana Wells. And we are two of the many nationwide members of Business Leaders for Racial and Social Justice, a coalition of business leaders and owners advocating to end systemic racial and social injustice for Black people through dialogue, education, and action. We currently have 3 pillars of our organization. They are getting out the vote, ending homelessness, and changes in policing. Lindsay and I serve in our Changes in Policing group and look forward to learning how we might support IP efforts, Innocence Project efforts in driving changes affecting the criminal justice system. We'll kick off the evening with Nigel Quiroz, Innocence Project's policy analyst, and make sure to stick around because we'll follow that with hearing directly from our speaker of the hour and exoneree Huwe Burton. We will walk through Huwe's life before, during, and after his conviction and get an understanding of how Innocence Project made it possible for him to be exonerated.
But first, I'm excited to introduce Mr. Nigel Quiroz, policy analyst at the Innocence Project, where he conducts policy agenda research and reviews legal issues that seek to prevent and reveal wrongful convictions and assure compensation for the wrongfully convicted upon prison release. Nigel received his BA in political science from Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and his Juris Doctorate from Southern University Law Center in 2017, where he served as a student attorney in the Juvenile Justice Clinic. Nigel, we are so happy to have you here with us tonight. Can you tell us what you do? Tell us what you do at the Innocence Project and the role policy plays in your organization's mission. So welcome, Nigel.
Hey, thank you, Lindsay and Dr. Dana, for having me tonight. Well, as the policy analyst at the Innocence Project, I just help to push our agendas. So our mission at the Innocence Project is to free wrongfully convicted people through DNA testing and reform the system to reveal and prevent future wrongful convictions. So the Innocence Project, most people know or may not know about the work that we do with our cases. We were involved in the exonerated fives exoneration and also Huwe Burton's, who you would hear from later. So a lot of people know that we are a legal organization, but a lot of our work is done in the policy realm also to actually prevent future wrongful convictions. So I just help with our changes to policy that we actually push.
Awesome. Thanks for letting us know that. So tell us something about Innocence Project that we maybe would not find on your website, or why you personally chose to work with them.
Well, I personally chose to work with the Innocence Project because as a political science major in undergrad, I was kind of a policy wonk. But when I went to law school, I did a lot of junior lobbying. So I didn't know much about the policy agenda of the Innocence Project, but I was actually afforded the opportunity to intern in the policy department for 6 months. So when I did that, I just realized how much work was being done in state legislatures across the country in order to change and prevent future wrongful convictions. So that's something that a lot of people might not know about the IP, as we call it, is our policy work.
Awesome. So you mentioned the work done across the country. And a lot of times when we think of policy, we think of the national level, especially with the national election coming up. But you do have 56 regional organizations. So what similarities and differences do you see in cases across the country? And what role does policy play in that?
Well, we see that most wrongful convictions have a pretty common thread of causes. So we've had 367 post-conviction DNA exonerations to this day in 37 states. We found that we have different causes. A big cause is eyewitness misidentification. A lot of times people don't know that eyewitness identification, you think it's something really ironclad, but cross-racial identification, there's a lot of issues with it. It's not as reliable. So we see that happens in a lot of our different cases. Also, the misapplication of forensic science, false confessions or admissions, which happened in Huwe's case, as you would hear later, and also incentivized informants. So those are a lot of the similarities that we see. We see that those common threads of wrongful convictions occur in most of our exonerations.
That's really interesting. And I did note on Innocence Project's website, you have a list of really interesting facts kind of about all of that. And one of the things that really jumped out to me was the sheer number of wrongful convictions just based on wrongful eyewitness testimony. Do you happen to know that number off the top of your head?
Not them, but it has occurred in 69% of our wrongful convictions. So it's a very, very high number, and it's actually like forever changing as we see. But eyewitness misidentification is the highest cause of wrongful convictions that we see.
That's crazy. Yeah. So about how many letters does Innocence Project get monthly or annually?
Well, we break it down annually, so we receive about 2,400 a year. So we've received it since our inception 65,000 letters and requests for representation, and we only accept about 2% of those. So you can see how that is. Yeah.
And so, how does Innocence Project determine which cases to accept?
Okay. Yes. So we have an intake department who actually there's a 3-phase intake process that goes on. There's initial request. Someone who's actually in prison will write to the Innocence Project requesting representation, and we send them back a 13-page questionnaire that they fill out with all the information about their case that they can recall. And then after that, after that's reviewed by our intake department, we have an investigations attorney there and several case analysts. It moves on into a final review. So some of these, like this is a pretty long process. It takes years sometimes for certain cases to be reviewed.
I can only imagine. And so as we all know, especially those of us in business, time is money. Yeah. And so how much can that potentially cost to prove someone's innocence, or in another, I guess, way to look at it, how many legal hours could even be billed to that if you were billing it?
Yes. So every state is different. So the numbers that we see from California, we estimate about 5,100 attorney hours are spent exonerating a person. So if you put that at the mid-tier court rate, it will be about $500,000. Actually, $513,600 per exoneration, and sometimes it could go on the higher end of that.
Can you say that number again? How many hours?
5,100 attorney hours.
I just want to make sure I heard you right.
Yeah. 5,100 attorney hours.
Wow.
$513,600.
Wow.
$513,000. Yeah.
That's incredible. I mean, that's truly incredible.
Yeah.
And so with that, and this is going to show my ignorance for a moment, but how long can it take from the time you do intake someone's case or accept it? Can it take to get someone exonerated or proven innocent? And I don't know that are those the same thing?
They are the same thing in all of, yes. It takes years. It takes years for the intake process to go through. Now, if we have an instance where a person, let's say, is on death row, so 20 of our clients have at some point of their trial phase been sentenced to death, those are expedited. So of course, because it's time is of the essence there. So that might take a little quicker, but for an average case, it will take over 5 years.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And so how many clients does Innocence Project have at a time?
At a time, each attorney, we have 5 staff attorneys. So we have, it varies, but about, I would say over 50 at our office. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And that's the national office. Now, do the regional offices also?
Yes, definitely. And with those clients that we have, there are also always new requests matriculating through, so it might go higher. And we have certain attorneys who've had the same clients for a couple decades who haven't been exonerated yet, and we're still working on their cases. Wow. Yes.
And so now to Hugh. So why was Hugh's case selected? Do you have details on that?
Well, Hugh's case, it was an actual a very infamous case, I guess you would say. It made a lot of the headlines in New York. And actually, Hugh can tell you that he actually wrote to a couple of different organizations before his case landed with the Innocence Project. So the evidence was there. They were able to secure DNA testing, and that's why it was chosen. All of our cases are DNA cases. So unfortunately, if it's non-DNA, we won't be able to actually take them on.
Okay. All right. So now to policy, with you being the policy analyst. So what policies is Innocence Project currently working on to award compensation to wrongfully convicted people?
So currently we have 35 states that award compensation for somebody who's been wrongfully convicted. So we've passed some sort of legislation in 35 states. Now, all aren't created equal. We have certain states that just offer, Montana is one, they just offer tuition reimbursement at a state university, but some are better than others. So our goal is to have compensation in all 50 states. And compensation isn't just monetarily. We look at social services, a health plan for people, because men and women, they've been in jail for decades. They haven't been afforded the opportunity possibly to learn a trade or to go to school to further their education. So we push for vocational training, any type of tuition reimbursement, on top of maybe a housing stipend, or any type of medical coverage, because once they're let out, they have to be reacclimated to society and get on with their life.
And so just to be clear, outside of these 35 states, there are still states that will exonerate someone after potentially being locked up for half of their life.
Yes.
Not give them any compensation whatsoever.
Yes. And now that doesn't stop them from getting any compensation at all. A lot of times people have, some clients have had private lawsuits.
Mm-hmm.
But we find that the big issue that we find with pushing the compensation reforms is it's all about the bottom line, the money. So the state legislature always says we don't have the money for that. But a lot of times, if someone gets a private lawsuit and the amount is in the millions of dollars, the taxpayers have to pay for that. So we push for a statutory amount that's the same for everybody every year, and we find that in the end it comes out better and fairer for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have several people on the line listening and watching all over the nation. What can we do as citizens to help? What can we do in our various states and regions to help this process?
Well, in various states and regions, I would say to go to our site, innocenceproject.org, and sign up for action alerts. We always have legislation going through every legislative session. And lawmakers love to hear from their constituency. So if there's a bill that we're pushing, that we're advocating for, we would partner with Phone to Action and have you call the governor's office or your state rep's office and let them know, like, this bill, this eyewitness ID bill, or this compensation bill is on the docket, and can we move on this? Like, people need to be compensated.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. That's very helpful. And is there anything else that we can do together to help just change the system? Is there any nationwide effort to help change the law or the policy?
Yes, there are nationwide efforts, but as we say, all politics are local, because at the end of the day, if it's a federal law, it might not trickle down to every state, and every state might interpret it differently. So yes, there are nationwide efforts, and actually we've passed a few federal laws. There's a federal compensation law that is actually pretty good. So yeah, there's always things that are being passed and pushed for.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nigel. Is there anything else that you would like to add about Innocence Project and how we can support?
Yes. So donations are always welcome. As you said, the cost of wrongful convictions are actually really, really high, and we are a nonprofit. No cost is ever passed on to any of our clients. So all of this is completely pro bono work that we do. So
awesome. Thank you so much. So anybody that's watching, we are, our goal is to raise $1 million to support Innocence Project. As you heard Nigel state, the cost for one case, the average would be, I think he said about $500,000 for one case. So we're trying to raise enough to cover maybe two exonerees. So that would be our ask tonight, is that you donate what you can, go to GoFundMe, and our tag is at the bottom of the screen rolling right there. So thank you so much, Nigel. We'll come back to you at the end of the evening. And right now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Dana.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you for those who have donated. Thank you for those who are about to donate now. and later. And so, of course, by now you've heard Hugh's story that he was arrested and charged and convicted of murdering his mother at age 16. And he was released 19 years later at age 37, and then fully exonerated on January 24th, 2019, at the age of 46. I'd like to introduce you to our speaker of the hour, Huwe Burton, exoneree, two-time marathon runner, and piano player. Huwe, welcome.
Hey, how's it going, Doc? How you doing? How's everybody doing? Good?
Good, good. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you
me.
so much. And we want to understand your experience, so we as business leaders can for racial and social justice know how to mobilize and how to support policy reform and hold people accountable and help people be set up for success once they are released from prison. And before we start even further, I want to apologize on behalf of all of us for the loss of your parents. We know that you're an only child, and we applaud you for your resilience and grit. And thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So it's interesting, when we were doing our introductions to you about a month or so ago, I asked you for a picture of you.
Yes.
So there's this thing going on about a picture, and I want you to tell me about this picture. And,
Okay.
and as we start this, tell me about your mental health. How has this affected you, sharing your story, and just and let us know if you're okay.
Yes. First, I am okay. But sharing my story, it's actually therapeutic for me. It affords me the opportunity to talk about a lot of things that I wasn't afforded the opportunity to talk about. For many years, I would try to tell people about my innocence, but it seemed like the world didn't want to hear me. So now that I have the opportunity to speak about it, every chance that I get, I want to make sure that I tell the truth about what happened, what they did, what they knew, and when they knew it. And so talking to audiences is therapy for me, because it's also for me to try to inspire people to get more involved, so things like this don't happen to us more 16-year-old boys. So
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Good.
And when you're talking about that, tell us about 16-year-old Huwe. You know, tell us, you were in private school, you were raised in the Boogie Down Bronx during the age of hip hop. You and I are the same age, the same generation.
Yes.
What were your goals
Uh,
in high school? Tell
uh,
us about those years.
Yeah, back then, the only thing I really wanted to do was music. I was convinced in my head that I was going to be selling out the garden. So, school, although, I went because it was what you were expected to do, school didn't really challenge me. So I didn't really have an interest in it. Music spoke more to me. I understood it. So, that was my plans before this, was to really get more involved in music. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and it looks like you shared a picture of us with you and your parents. If
Ah,
you could see that.
yeah. Interesting. That was my fifth birthday. Now, yeah, it was about 77, somewhere
Mm,
there. Judging from the the volume of my dad's shirt, I was telling you earlier. So it had to be about 77.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
you Very, very good times. You know, just coming from loving people. My parents were older when I was born, and for the early 70s when I was born, I don't think they were expected to be bringing any children into the world. My father was almost 50. Uh,
Mm,
my mom was like 43, 44. So I for the 70s, that was kind of something that was rare. So very very tight knit growing up. So that was a lot of happy times there.
good, good, good. And when I asked you about a 16-year-old picture, you told me something. Can you share it with everybody? When I said, where are the family photos? Give me a 16-year-old picture of you.
Yeah, when you asked me that, what was interesting is that I was stuck for a minute because it's something that I knew, but I had never shared it with anyone before. But what that was that I didn't have any. And I don't, the only picture that I have as a 16-year-old or as a teenager is being let out of the precinct. Um, Almost as if they tried to just like erase uh, any evidence that I was ever here. So pictures were just getting lost, and out of all of the pictures that got lost, or just I don't know what happened to them. That was the only thing that was left was the 16-year-old picture being let out of the precinct. So,
Lindsay, can you show that picture again, please? Yeah, that's the only picture you had.
yeah, that's the only one I have. I'm 16.
Hmm. So we asked everyone to post their age 16 year picture and to stand in solidarity with us here. So if you have one, please post it in our chat. And so walk us through this. You find your mother murdered, the investigation, your arrest, and your conviction. Were you Mirandized? Were you offered an attorney? Were you able to speak to your? Tell us, how long it took them to convict you and sentence you, and did you have a trial? Like, just tell us all of that in the time frame.
Good time frame. So I mean that day was January 3rd, 1989. The day started as normal as any other day. It was my first day back to school after the holiday break. My mom was just starting a 2-week vacation. She was a registered nurse. My dad was out of the country visiting his mom in Jamaica. And I got up, got ready for school as normal as any other day. I ate, left, and I left my mom on the couch. And the last thing I said to her was, I was going to do a little bit better in school this semester. And we laughed about that because, we both knew that I really didn't have interest in going, but it wasn't that the work was challenging. I just didn't have interest. So we laughed and I left and did the whole day in school. I got back in between 2:30 and 3 o'clock. But I noticed when I got to the house, I noticed the car was gone. So, thinking she's just starting a vacation, she's probably out running errands. So we lived my parents owned a 3-family private house, and we lived on the second floor. So I come in downstairs, and as I'm coming up to the second floor landing, I can hear the phone ringing. So I quickly go in, I answer the phone because it was by the door. And it was a friend of mine said, did I want to come by? So I said, oh, okay, you know what? My mom's not home. I could go and come back. She should be home when I got back. So I turned right around, closed the door, went out, and I went to my friend's house. I stayed there until about 5:30 or so and came back. Coming back, I noticed the car is still gone. So I come inside. Now I'm taking off my things. I'm walking towards the back of the apartment. I see that my parents' bedroom is open, which was something that we didn't do. If people are not in the house, we close the doors. So just out of curiosity, why is this door open? I go inside the room, and that's where I found my mom. So I'm screaming, I'm crying. I go to grab the telephone that is in my parents' bedroom, but there is no cord on the base to the receiver. They had taken out that cord and they had bound her wrist with that telephone cord. So I run out into down the hallway and used the phone that was right by the front door. I called the police from there. I couldn't stay in the house, so I run outside and wait for the police to come. They get there, they question me about everything, and they asked me what my father was at. I told them he was in Jamaica at the time. I called him. He was on the next plane back. They asked me if I had any place to go. I told them I had a godmother that lived in Mount Vernon. That picture where you see my parents and myself, that's in that same house.
Mm-hmm.
So they asked me if I noticed if anything was out of the ordinary or strange. I said, I don't know. I just know when I left this morning, the car was here. The car's not here. So they ended up taking me to my godmother's house, where I just stayed in the bed. I couldn't really eat. I couldn't sleep. If I did sleep, it was in 15, 20-minute intervals and just back up, just kind of staring at the ceiling. That was on January 3rd. On January 5th, they called my godmother and they told her they wanted to bring me down for a polygraph test and that I would be right back. And they came to get me and, you know, they said he'll be right back. And they brought me down to the precinct. And once down in the precinct, they asked me to tell them again what happened that day. And I told them the same thing, but maybe about an hour and a half, 2 hours into that interview, it changed from a just, you know, tell us what happened to they had evidence that I committed this crime. I started crying immediately, telling them, no, I didn't commit this crime. And I wanted to talk to my dad. They told me I would be able to talk to my dad after I told them the truth and let them know what happened. This goes back and forth for a while. And finally, they tell me after hours, they say, you know, your friend's house that you went to, this girlfriend you had, we checked that out. You were there. But what you don't know, you're 16. She's going on 14. She's 13 going on 14. That's considered statutory rape. I'd never heard the term before. I'd never been questioned by police. So now I'm terrified. So now they're telling me that, look, if you don't tell us you committed this crime, not only are you going to go to prison for statutory rape, you're going to go to jail for, you know, murdering your mother. You're going to go to jail for both of these things. But if you tell us that you committed this crime because we know that this was an accident, we'll make sure your dad can come and pick you up from family court and you will never have to go to Rikers Island for statutory rape. So they keep this going on for a while. What this actually did was created the feeling that I could not leave that room unless I told them what they wanted to hear. And the fact that they kept telling me, well, we know that this was an accident. You just tell us it was an accident. We're going to get you the help in which you need. So we sat there and concocted this false story, a story that would begin to fall apart a week after they actually got me to give this false confession. So I was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. And
can I ask a question? Did they Mirandize you? Did they?
No, they didn't Mirandize me. They told me that I would be able to see my dad after I told them what they needed to hear. Unbeknownst to me, the whole time, my dad and more family members were downstairs in the precinct. They were telling them that I didn't want to see them, and they wouldn't let me know that anyone was there for me.
And
So,
had you eaten or slept since you saw your mother?
No, since then, I as far as food, I couldn't hold any food down, you know, and sleeping is because the only thing I can see is coming into the bedroom. That's the only image that is in my head. Everything else is pretty much a blur around me. So I hadn't really eaten. I hadn't really slept. And then to be in there, and then after two and a half hours of being in there, you're telling me that, you know, you have evidence that leads them to believe that I committed the crime. So again, as I said, it goes on for a while. And when they finally get this confession, they had me believing that I was going to be led from there to family court where my dad was going to come and pick me up. In my mind, my 16-year-old naive mind, I'm thinking, well, I'll tell my dad, listen, Daddy, this is what they made me say. There was no way for me to get out of the room. That was the only way. Even in that picture, you see me being walked out there. I'm still under the impression in that picture that I'm going on my way to family court. It's not until all of the cameras are flashing and people are, you know, asking questions that I realize that, okay, something is wrong, something is off. So that's pretty much how that went. I was represented. My father had he had great sense to know that I needed representation. He had gotten me the best defense attorney quite possibly in the country at the time, and one of my heroes, William Kunstler. So he was my defense attorney, and we fought hard. We fought hard for close to 3 years. But after 3 years, I eventually would lose at trial and was sentenced to 15 years to life. So um,
So tell us about that. You're a 16-year-old boy. You're
yeah.
tried as an adult, sentenced to 15 years to life in prison.
Mhm.
You spent 2 years at Rikers, and you'll need to tell us about Rikers because I thought that was a prison until you told me it was a state jail.
Right.
And then you're 16 years old, 17 years in prison in New York State. How do you survive prison with adults, these violent criminals? And did you graduate from high school? Did you get additional training while you were there? Tell us about that.
Initially going in to prison as a 16-year-old, this is something that is extremely foreign to you. I know for me, it's something that a lot of the kids that I grew up around, this is not something that, was a track for them to be, go to jail. So all of it was foreign. The first few months were extremely rough. Being in there as a 16-year-old who is not from that kind of an element, and then on top of that, to be in prison for that kind of a crime, it was rough. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, you learn to defend yourself, and you know that it's just something that you have to do in order to survive. As far as education is concerned, when we were talking, there was a small part I didn't let you know is that after 23 months on Rikers Island, the first 23 months, my father was able to secure bail for me.
Mm.
Bail was $100,000. They allowed him to put up our house at the time. So he put up the house, and on December 7th, 1990, I came home on bail, where I was actually doing the trial from out in the street. I got my GED while I was home in those few months. But as I said, I lost that trial and was sentenced to 15 to life. So they took me right from the courtroom that day, and took me back. I think one of the worst things for me was to see my father crying as they're leading me away. So because he just knew that was going to be the end of the whole ordeal. But I got a GED while I was home. Shortly after that, I was remanded and brought back and sent to upstate prisons. So during that time, I was just doing a lot of programming and a lot of appealing. The same lawyer who we had, he told my dad, "Listen, don't worry about anything. I'm going to do the appeals. This is wrong. We're gonna figure it out." That attorney passed in 1995, 1996, William Kunstler. I kept going. I began writing to people and, just trying to get people interested in the case. And, that took me for a while until I actually wrote to the Innocence Project, but we'll definitely get into that as well. But that was pretty much the ordeal of what I went through, while, yeah.
And tell me about your dad. I read that he visited you in prison every week or in jail every week. What was that? Tell me about that.
When I
You do
was
it until you're released. Yeah.
Well, when I was on Rikers Island and in facilities closer to the city, it afforded him the opportunity to come much more often. He was the rock. He was the rock. When I feel like I couldn't press anymore, he would be right there with an encouraging word, with a bit of good news of some type of evidence was found, and always that smile. That smile is kind of like it was very reassuring. Even when I was small, it just kind of let you know that everything was going to be okay. So watching that, and then watching what he went through, I always felt that his burden was heavier than mine because I'm in prison, for this crime that I didn't commit. But here is a man who is still there, is still in the same neighborhood, and you have the burden of taking care of your wife's affairs and preparing a defense for your son, but still somehow managing to hold on to your own sanity, and having like a delicate balance to do it. When I looked at a lot of those things, I was like, you know what? No, you can do this. You can do it. So that's the rock. Yeah.
Yeah. So your dad taught you how to be a rock. He taught you that resilience that you have. Yeah. So, you're innocent, and you were writing all of these letters. How many letters did you write? To whom did you write them? How many years did it take you to get a response? And what made those attorneys respond to your case? And how many years did Innocence Project work on your case?
Okay, so when I started writing letters, I don't know how many letters I was writing. I would find organizations that would deal with people who, had claims of innocence. So any organization that was out there at the time, I was writing to. Innocence Project was one of the organizations that I wrote to. Some would write back, some, they wouldn't, more than likely because of the overwhelming volume of mail, as you heard Nigel say. So Innocence Project did write back this one time and explain to me that, we looked over everything, your letter, but there are no issues of DNA in your case. But in looking at the letter, they just felt something about the case. And they sent the case to Northwestern Law Clinic with Steve Drizzen, who specialized in, false confessions, especially with youth. So in seeing that there was an interest sparked in the case, I was still incarcerated at the time, and they got in contact with me, and they said it's not a guarantee, but they contacted me, and we began talking and going over things. And the more we began to talk, the more things they looked at and said, okay, there's something here. That took us all the way up until from maybe I want to say about 2007 till about 2009 till I was released. And their thing was, look, if you still want to pursue this when you come home, let us know. In my mind, there was nothing else to pursue. There was nothing else in life to do. That was the first call I made, and that set off the next 10 years with everything, the fighting, the getting all of the evidence, opening the case, and just putting everything back together. The Innocence Project got back on board. Well, we got on board again in 2016. I believe that, we kind of took it as far as we could. And they asked the Innocence Project to get on board. There was a newly Bronx Conviction Integrity Unit formed. So all of these things were factors, and the Innocence Project got on board in 2016. And things really, really picked up steam from 2016 to my exoneration in 2019.
So what do you think it was that got you exonerated? What do you said they had the new integrity unit. What was it, do you think, if you could tell us?
Well, I think for them, the biggest issue was the confession. When we start to examine a lot of things, there are certain things that we can't deny. For example, as I said, the first thing when they asked me if I noticed if anything was out of the ordinary was my mom's car is not here. It was here when I left for school this morning. So a week after they arrested me and I was on the news and in every newspaper, they actually got a hit on the car. And they called the officers in the Bronx who arrested me and told them, look, we found the car that was involved in that case you guys had. So they went immediately up to the Mount Vernon Police Department to see who was in possession of this car. To their horror, it was our tenant, someone whom they questioned on the 3rd and deemed to be someone who was of no relevance to the case. They had a problem because you coerced a child into saying you did something you didn't do. and you put it all over the news. You called the media and did this. And now there is evidence coming that the person you questioned on the 3rd is the one who actually committed this crime. What did you do and or say to that child to make him say he murdered his mother when he didn't? What did you do or say? So not wanting to have to deal with that, they decided, look, we're going to cover this up even more. So they conspired with the actual murderer to cover up this murder. So they had a problem there. So when these Bronx and Conviction Integrity Unit was looking at that, okay, how did we get the car? Then we went into his past. He was on parole for assault and rape at the time. He had issues of psychiatric issues growing up. These things were all documented. He and the woman he was staying with at the time, they had issues with their previous landlord, where there was an assault involved. All of these things were known. And
your parents did not know this about him?
No, unlike 2020, in 1989, we couldn't just jump on our laptops and do background checks and, see who's who and what's what, who's coming into your home. And I, looking back at that, looking in hindsight, my parents were homeowners, for the first time. I can remember that bottom apartment being empty for a few months. And I know that there was a rush to keep up, make sure that mortgage is, I don't know what kind of loan they took out to get that. So I think that there was a rush to judgment just to fill the place, and there was no real checks and balances for them to find out who they were inviting into their home, so.
So we have a question for you. How many individuals did you serve with land in prison from a forced confession from police, do you think?
I wouldn't know. I know it's a few. I know it's a few. Some people may not even say anything. Usually one of the things that I realize with people that are falsely arrested and charged with crimes is that the nature of the crimes are usually heinous. So people are not in prison kind of just talking about, well, this is why I'm here and I'm innocent. So sometimes a lot of guys would just suffer in silence. Just knowing that they're innocent. So I guess in answer to your question, I'm saying that I knew of some people that were in there that were innocent. I don't know of the exact circumstances. I know mine was always a point of embarrassment because I allowed them to make me say these things. And so my thing was always a source of like embarrassment. So I tried not to talk too much about it while I was there.
So I'll just say this, how can a child allow an adult to do anything? You were a child at that time. And I'm glad you spoke up and you talked about parole, not speaking up. Tell us about that time you said, I'm going to use my voice.
Yeah, I remember being in there, like at my first parole hearing, and just being paralyzed with the fear. And there's so much things riding on everything, it's they put so much pressure on, you have to say the right thing. And it's so much. And I went to go open my mouth and like nothing would come out. And, I remember one of the commissioners stopping and, saying that if you can't talk, we're gonna end this hearing. So I tried to talk a little bit more. She abruptly ended the hearing, and that was the end of that. But I swore that after that, I wasn't going to allow people to take my voice from me. So.
And how old were you at that time?
I want to say I was 32.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So you got released after 19 years. You went in as a 16-year-old boy and came out a 37-year-old man.
Yeah.
Did you ever have a chance to grieve your mother?
No, I was never afforded the opportunity to do that. From the time that this happened, I couldn't even process it. 48 hours later, I'm being arrested for it. I spend the next few years fighting the case. I'm convicted. I spend the next 19 in prison. It wasn't until I came home that I was afforded the opportunity to properly grieve. It's it's wild. They wouldn't let me go to the funeral when they had me arrested. They wouldn't let me go. So I remember sitting down with a piece of paper and a pen, and I called myself writing the eulogy, and I put it in an envelope and begged somebody, please, can you just read this at the funeral? So they did. They honored my wishes, and that was the best I could do as far as was write a eulogy. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about this. When you get out at age 37, you, how did you deal with the changes in the world? Did somebody pick you up? Did you have any clothes? Did you have any compensation? Did you get a job? How did being in prison on parole affect your ability to get a job?
Well, thankfully, I had good family support. So as soon as I came home, there was employment opportunities for me. So I was like blessed and thankful for that, because that's not something that everyone comes home to after a long period of time. And also, given the time in which I came home at the height of the recession. So it's like September 1st, 2009. The bottom had fallen out, I believe, the year before. So, people who had never been in prison before were just as confused as I was. Yeah, I had clothes. Thankfully, my dad, he had foresight, and he was like, he had put a CD together for me. So there was, there was a little something there when I did come home. So my landing wasn't as rough as a lot of other people, but again, it was bittersweet because I was released, but I still had this burden. Hadn't proven my innocence yet, so it was like, whatever I did, as soon as you pull my name up, that's coming up with it. So there was still work to be done, but yeah.
Yeah. So you just talked about other people not being as fortunate as you. What is it like for them? Did you already have an ID? What do they do once you are released for you to get back into society?
Well, some people depend, and that depends. Sometimes people do so much time that family has either moved away or they've died. So you have to say, okay, well, I have to get into a program. I have to get into this halfway house, and I have to have these people help me get on my feet. But I've been in there 20, 25 years. I don't know what that looks like. So you're kind of just being led around. So for some, it's frustrating, and some people give up early. Some people stick it out, but it's not without its sense of problems. I mean, when I came home just to get a state ID was like jumping through hoops, and I'm like, that shouldn't have to be. Coming home after all this time, and then still deal with the mandates of parole. So that was a whole other animal that I, had to deal with as well. So.
And what is that? What are those mandates that you're talking about?
Well, when I first came home, my job was in New Rochelle, New York, which is outside of the five boroughs, right outside the five boroughs. But I was told that I couldn't take that job initially because it was outside of the five boroughs, and the conditions of my parole says I cannot leave the five boroughs. And I'm saying, but it's literally walking up the street. It's just considered Westchester. I have a job. There are people who don't have jobs out here. I have something. In their mind, no, we don't care. You cannot leave the five boroughs, and that's the end of that. So, I mean, that's just one of many examples of things that, parole might be able to put in your way to impede you from growing. And certainly, and let me be fair, in a lot of instances, a lot of people who are on parole may end up doing things to kind of facilitate that thing. So that road goes both ways. But by and large, for the most part, you know, parole was for me was just something that was really just in my way. It was a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so, 30 years of your life are stolen from you. Let's just say it like that. It's stolen, taken, and you can't get those back. Are you pursuing compensation through a civil suit? If so, how do they calculate your earnings if you were not even in the workforce yet? And are you planning a civil suit against the detectives and attorneys who built the false case against you?
Yeah, I'm in a civil phase now. Um, we're definitely pursuing all of those avenues. For me, compensation looks like people being held accountable for what they did. Because this wasn't only done to me, and this is what they know, that they did this more than they did this to other teenagers. As a matter of fact, they did this to other teenagers within months of doing this to me. So for me, compensation looks like holding people accountable, making sure that they do not do anything like this to anyone else ever again. I mean, the prosecutor in my case is now a judge. I mean, and she's actually sitting on the stand presiding over cases as you and I sit and speak. So that's a problem,
Yeah.
So that's what compensation looks like for me. As far as how they compute it, I don't know. I don't know the logistics on how they base that. As you said, I didn't have any work history. I was a 16-year-old kid, but I still had my whole life ahead of me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know how we can put a number to a whole life ahead of someone.
Yeah.
So that I'll allow the those folks to deal whatever they're doing. You deal with that. But for me, that's what compensation looks like: holding people accountable.
And so here's what our ask is: what can we do to bring these concerns to lawmakers that you just talked about how you were treated and others?
Yeah, as Nigel was saying, local law officers. I mean, they had, or they're supposed to answer to you. You vote people in. I think a lot of times we focus on a lot of the federal government. The federal government, it's like, a lot of the things are taking place locally. District attorneys are an elected position. If we're saying there needs to be reform, then if that is the top, then I think we need the reform to start right there. If that DA is going to allow this kind of play to stay in play, then we have to, remove that person. It's up to you, those who vote, your voice. So those are some of the things that we can do.
So basically, business leaders for racial and social justice and all of those listening, Hugh just said we have to use our voice at our local levels and look at the policies there and vote on those and hold those accountable at our local level. Thank you for that. And so for us, you said engage at the local level. And then what resources do you think individuals who are being released from prison need to set themselves up so that they don't go back to prison? And there's that saying that you said, when you go to prison, you pay your debt to society for the crime. And how can you pay a debt to society for a crime if you didn't commit it?
Wow, that's that's a lot. For me, you're right. There is no way to pay a debt to society for something that you didn't do. But what I do acknowledge is that there are a lot of things in society that are broken. That's how I ended up there. And then the first, and I want to make sure I answer right. What was the first part of what you had said?
So, you talked about resources. When when individuals are released from prison, what resources do they need to set themselves up for success?
Well, being that I'm talking to business leaders, as business leaders, you guys always have the foresight, the vision to see where society is going to go, what is going to be the needs of society in the next 10 years. I think that that's what makes you guys great business leaders. What's going to be the trend in the next 15 to 20 years? Well, if you guys can figure out what the trends are going to be in the next 10, 15, 20, 25 years, then you're going to know who is going to, or what type of training people are going to need in order to fill that.
Mhm.
So that's the answer to your questions right there. People coming out of prison in the next 5 years are going to need these kind of skills in order to survive. When I was in there, one of the things they would give to guys is small engines, i.e. lawnmowers and weed whackers and things that fix those. But now you fast forward and you're in 2020 and you're being released and you're talking about IT and you're talking about all these different things. I mean, my knowledge of how to fix a weed whacker or to fix a lawnmower is kind of obsolete.
Mhm.
So it's almost like society it's moving forward and it's leaving a lot of people that are just languishing. So you know what you want to see out of business and where society is going to be in 5, 10, 15 years. Train the people. So what can you do? What resources do they need? You know, where do you want to see business?
Mhm. So what I hear you saying is business leaders need to influence policy around training for people who are in jail or incarcerated. So when they come out, they have skills that they could use to get them marketable. Is that what I heard you saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying, because I'm looking at it like this. I think, people would want to be trained, come home, or train while they're home and be able to take care of themselves and their family. A lot of guys are being trained in different things inside prison to only fit and suit the needs of what is going on in the prison.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay.
They understand, the government, trust me, understands the value of having them in there, training them to do something to keep the prisons running. We are not getting the memo here.
Mm, mm, mm. Well, I see a comment here from one of our participants that there are thousands of construction jobs that will be unfilled due to the aging workforce. So that might be something that we could action with our group about impacting legislation.
Absolutely. I got into the elevator industry at the age of 40.
Mm,
Okay? So, and left after my exoneration as an elevator mechanic. I wasn't making much in the grand scheme of things. I was only making 29 bucks an hour, but 29 bucks an hour from someone who was in prison making 16 cents an hour. It's when you start to look at that, it's like, okay, 29 bucks an hour in New York isn't really anything.
right.
But again, it's something that I did and I stuck with it. So in answer to whoever said that about the construction, they're absolutely right, man. There's people are aging out and younger people are not trying to learn plumbing, electric. They're not trying to learn that. So there is a void there.
Yeah.
And like over here in New York, anywhere you go in New York, there is construction going on in the city. And I think it will be enough construction for the next 10 years in New York.
Mm.
Yeah.
So business leaders, we have a call to action here. Skilled labor pools would be great training for people who are looking to transition out. So we can make a note of that. And then, so let me ask you this about Innocence Project. What support does Innocence Project need to help continue their work fighting for those who've been wrongly convicted?
For me, I would say volunteering your time. And the reason why I say that is because when the Innocence Project got on board with my case, I was working in the city. So sometimes they would invite me, like, come down by the office. We want to, go over something. We want to discuss something. So I would go. But in going to the office, you get a chance to see all of the people working in there, from the person that's just answering the phone in the front to people that are, going over policy and just doing different things, but everyone is working. And it's like when you're walking through the hallways, you're like, okay, this is where it's happening at. And it's inspiring to actually just walk up and down. There used to be some times where they would tell me come by and I would just hang out longer than I was supposed to be. I should have left a long time ago, but I'm just kind of walking around because you really get inspired. You learn so much. Just from hearing about other cases, you learn about what they did and what policies are being set for that, and you know so you learn. So
Yeah.
if there's an Innocence Project anywhere, volunteer your time, and you'll go, you'll learn something, man, and it'll push you to want to do other things.
Right.
But volunteer.
So business leaders and all of you who are listening, we have a call to action to volunteer at Innocence Projects. We have 56 branches around the country. And so somebody is beating me to my question. I won't call her name, but you were fully exonerated in 2019. Just know we'll get to that. What does full exoneration mean? And do you have to select yes on documents that ask if you were convicted of a felony?
Yeah, no, I don't have to. As far as that's concerned, I'm 16 years old again.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. So you're 16 years old again, and you're going to answer our last question. You're 16 years old in spirit, 48 years old today. What are your career goals and dreams?
Wow. Well, real estate. I really fell in love with real estate, learning about it, and watching my father, watching my mom as well, but more my father, because he was a man who had very modest means by way of education, but he managed to, put something together for himself in this country, and it was through real estate. So it made me, really want to get into it. Ownership, these things, it really resonated with me, being self-sufficient. So getting into real estate is what I want to do. I tried my hand at it. I took a loss, and it was a learning curve. So, I'm going to stay with it, and also should be starting in some schooling for audio engineering real soon. So that's in the immediate future.
Okay. And so tell me about the school for audio engineering.
Well, unlike traditional school, because as I told you, I don't like I don't like school. But it's really it's inside. You're actually inside studio, so it's hands-on. It's a 6-month course. I've been, playing music for many years, but in terms of how it sounds, I've never been good at that. So I want to put myself in school to really learn the finer points of engineering. So
hands-on program, 6 months in sound engineering at what school? Where is it?
It's in Manhattan. So it's RFFC, Recording Connections. So
Okay.
Recording Connections. It's a great school. So it's gonna be good.
Real estate is in your future. Sound engineering school. You said that you're no longer doing the elevator maintenance. What are you doing now?
Speaking just everywhere I can, just talking to people and bringing the truth to people. Because the way I look at it, those who are committed to burying the truth, they don't get tired. So
yeah. So speaking's your full-time job, I hear now. And of course, we had another question there. How can, let's see, how can people reach out to you and support you? And do you have a website or an email or LinkedIn that people could connect with you with? How do we do that? Or is that something you need? Tell us about it.
Well, you know what? I have a website. I have email is huweburton72@gmail.com.
Okay, we'll make sure we post that for you. huweburton72@gmail.com.
Yeah. Facebook is just Huwe Burton. So I mean, I should have been on LinkedIn a long time ago. So I have no website yet. So I'm looking for somebody. If you can help me develop a website, I'm open for suggestions.
Okay, he's open for suggestions for website development and LinkedIn setup. And so we just got a comment that you're an amazing speaker. So that is great to hear. And let's see here. Let's see. I'm looking at this. So we had someone say Innocence Project does a positive thing. So let's all help them. get the percentage up to of those who should be free. And that truly is a call to action. And then, so yes, and I think these comments are coming up fairly quickly. And so, yep, that's a call to action for our business leaders for racial and social justice, doing the ask to help you with your full-time speaking and help with building your website and LinkedIn. So thank you for posting that out there, community. And then, so if we could get our panel back on, Lindsay, if you could come on, and Nigel, and we're taking some additional questions from you. Thank you so much, Hugh, for that, and Nigel and Lindsay. So we're open for questions, everyone. Can we hear all of you?
Yes.
Yes.
So Hugh, we've got a lot of comments saying thank you for sharing your story with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you all. And thank you for listening too. Really
Absolutely. And donate now. And that's the feedback we're getting. Donate now. Please, please, please donate now. Lindsay, you're on mute.
Thank you. So at this point, we'll go ahead and transition, if that works. Thank you all. Please keep sending us your comments. Nigel, we have a question for you. Do you take advantage of using law students for the Innocence Project?
Oh, yes. So actually, the Innocence Project started as a law clinic at the Cardozo Law School in New York. So our founders, Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld, were law professors there. And to this day, we still have student attorneys. So student attorneys work with our attorneys on every case. So yes, that is a big part. So the attorney hours are also student attorney hours. They all count the same.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Awesome, good deal. And then we were asked what social handles can they follow for everyone on the panel. So I think that's
I'm popping them in there for us.
Dana will handle that. She'll pop those in the comments. And then our hashtag is Give19 for 19. We'll go ahead and put that link in the chat as well. Or if actually one of our wonderful business leaders for racial and social justice wouldn't mind to put that link in the chat for us that are following the feed, that would actually be wonderful. And let me see if there are any questions at this point. Great video. Oh, awesome. I just see some, the live link. Can we get a live link? I'm not sure I know what that means. Okay, well, yes, we will. Thank you, Farron, for sharing that. So at this point, I just want to thank everyone for being here and share that why I chose to be here tonight. So I'm gonna transition some of these. I'm gonna get it down to my reasoning for being here. So again, I'm Lindsay All, and I choose to support Innocence Project because I was able to not have years stolen from me. Right here, you can see a picture of me at age 16, just like we saw a picture of Hugh at age 16 earlier. And now you see a picture of me in my 30s. We're not going to say exactly what age, but now. And I can tell you that that's the exact same age right there that Hugh was when he was arrested and when his mother was brutally murdered. And I cannot imagine being in his shoes. But what I can tell you about myself at that age is that I was troubled, but I was also naive and gullible, and I didn't know who I even was. And what I can tell you about the years between then and now are that in that time that was stolen from Hugh, I was able to learn who I was. I was able in this photo to go to my high school prom. I was able to graduate from high school and to go to LSU, go Tigers. Had to throw that in there. I was able to find the love of my life and get married and have two beautiful daughters, and to establish a career and work for an amazing organization, and be able to meet wonderful other leaders like are on this call today. And none of that would have been possible if my life would have been stolen from me. And that's why it's important to me to donate to Innocence Project and to volunteer with Innocence Project, and to volunteer with business leaders for racial and social justice, because doing things like this and advocating for policy changes that don't allow police to lock a 16-year-old in a room until they make a wrongful confession, to advocate for policy changes that don't make it to where you can't ban education from prisons, like they did when Hugh was in prison, to where he wasn't allowed to further his education while he was there. Those are the reasons that I'm a part of this tonight, and that I ask that you donate $19, just $1 for every year that he spent of his life in prison. And so that's my reasoning. And with that, it's one of the many reasons, but with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Dana.
Thank you, Lindsay. And for me, I want you to donate now, because there are so many people who can't speak for themselves. I was the oldest daughter of 5 children of a preacher's kid, and I was always taught the oldest take care of the youngest. So I have this ingrained sense of responsibility to help those who can't advocate for themselves. And we're doing that tonight, helping those who can't advocate for themselves. So you can appreciate my 80s hair at age 16 on the left. And the picture of me on the right was me at a client site doing a business transformation project that I was so passionate about. I knew when I was age 19, when I was going to Texas A&M, whoop, Lindsay, that's for you, SEC. I knew that my career was going to change. So I changed my major from accounting to psychology and got a degree in industrial organizational psychology and created my own career path. I knew I would be in the job I have today and the business I have today, and it didn't exist before. I didn't see people who looked like me. So I had to create that path and meet wonderful people. I was afforded that opportunity. And so for those who haven't had that opportunity, I want to make sure that every dollar that we donate gives them those opportunities to be successful. People make mistakes, and it is terribly important for us to donate for those who didn't even make a mistake, and get them back, help them gain back some of those years that are taken from them, and hold the people who are accountable for taking advantage of young, innocent children and giving them a life that wasn't even of their own doing. You know, it's one thing to be convicted of something, that a crime that you did do, but to be convicted of something that you didn't do and have all of your resources taken away. Hugh mentioned he was fortunate that his dad and his mom planned, but there are so many others who haven't had that luxury. So donate now for those people who don't know that we're out here advocating for them, for those people who've written so many letters and they haven't had a response back. Maybe there's not enough resources available. we as business leaders can help change that. We can influence policy. We can make sure that those people who are not getting high school diplomas or job training get that training. We all know that there is a gap in our skilled labor pool. We have a bunch of skilled labor pool owners here in our Business Leaders for Racial and Social Justice Network. We know that IT skills are in demand. Let's donate, 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 get actively involved, and change the policies. I am all about changing policy. Policy is the foundation for the pattern and practice of behaviors that we've seen. So donate, and that is why I'm here tonight. Donate, donate, donate to Innocence Project.
Okay, so yeah, so this is a picture of me at 16, same age that Hugh went in. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. Hugh grew up in the Bronx. I always think of instances with Hugh and many of our New York City exonerees. I always think therefore the grace of God go I, because when I was 16, I was a little knucklehead. I was in high school and just bored and just doing things that I probably had no business doing. But at the age of 16, my mother took a chance and sent me away to live with my dad in Memphis to get me out of trouble. So this was me in 16, like the year leading until when I got sent to Memphis. So it just, my road has been long, but I just am fortunate enough to not have ran into the troubles that befell Hugh and a lot of our other exonerees. And like I said, that it can happen. It can happen to you. That's something that we always say. A lot of people think that wrongful convictions are rare, but they actually happen more often than you think, and it can happen to anyone that you know. But this picture in my 30s is actually my professional headshot when I started working at the IP after law school. So it's kind of funny to look at it now and juxtaposed with age 16. So policies that the Innocence Project are working on now that we can help lobby for. So since this summer and the tragic killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, we've also started working on police reform and police accountability. So we were able to repeal the law 50A in New York, which was a labor law that helped shield police officers' disciplinary records. So we're looking to push those type of reforms in all 50 states. We've had something on the books in Colorado, Connecticut, and that's a new realm of policy reform that we're going into. And during the pandemic, it's actually easier to volunteer than ever because everybody's like doing everything virtually via Zoom. So if you want to volunteer, you can just shoot an email to the Innocence Project. We have a volunteer sign up form, and if there's anything that we can help, that we need your help with, we can alert you. Also sign up for that action page, and they'll let you know in whatever state you're in. Since we're a 50-state policy organization, they will alert you if there's a police reform bill that's coming up on the legislative calendar in your state. Then we'll let you know, and we'll let you know who to call, your lawmaker in your area to help get the change made. I just want to thank you all for your time and just having us here to speak about this organization and the work that we do.
Interesting. This pick at 16, I was under the impression, even as I look at it now, I was thinking if I told them what they wanted to hear that I was going home. I didn't realize that the picture on the right would be that coming home picture. And I look at all of the things in between that that child had to experience, learn in real time. He had to go from 16 to being a grown man with a different set of responsibilities on his shoulder, ones that should not have been placed there. And I think that's why it's so important to donate to the IP, to get involved with the IP, to volunteer at the IP. So tomorrow it's not your son, it's not your brother, it's not your nephew, not your grandson who is sitting there looking like the deer in headlights, like I look right there in that picture. So, you know, organizations like this are very, very important work that is being done. And the more people that we have supporting the work, the more people we can actually free. Certainly, it took 3 law clinics and 30 years to uncover what they knew for sure 1 week after it happened. Everybody is not going to be so fortunate. And I acknowledge that and I realize that this thing was much bigger than just me being resilient. This was about a lot of people believing in me and everything that I was about. So donate, support, do what you can, because 30 years ago it was me. Tomorrow it can be someone very close to you. So thank you for having me. Thank you for listening. And let's get to work.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you, Hugh. Thank you, Nigel.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for donating tonight and for joining our event. And we hope you all have a wonderful evening and that you get to work. We have a lot of action to do.
Yes, donate, donate, donate. Thank you so much.
And thank you to my wonderful partner, Dr. Dana.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
All right.